Sure. Hey, everybody. Welcome to our holiday edition of DataON Virtual Meetup. I'm actually quite excited. We have so many attendees and customers today, and I feel like the holiday spirit is definitely in tune here. Um, a lot of stuff has happened. All of us has gone through another year of craziness and challenges. I'm just happy we're all sitting here talking. For those who doesn't know us, DataON is a hyperconverged infrastructure computing company. We work closely with Microsoft and Intel. And if you see all these Intel little tchotchkes, clearly we know where our marketing dollars coming from that I'm going to give away today. So for sure, anybody that doesn't have a shirt from DataON, put your name on the chat and we'll send you a shirt. That's all it is to it. Put your name in the email, we'll send you a t-shirt. Today is quite exciting. We have 3 guest speakers that we all know very well, and we could actually share technical stuff rather than marketing. We have, I'll let them introduce themselves. I'll do a quick intro. We have Alan. Everybody knows Alan. Alan is with Microsoft. He's also a previous DataON customer. He's been an incredible advocate of Azure Stack HCI. He knows everything about everything. So any question you have, you could feel free to open up today for questioning. John from Microsoft's here today, so we have John to answer a question. We also have Ernie Costa, who's an awesome dude who's from Commvault. He's going to share with you his experience running Azure Virtual Desktop on Azure Stack HCI, which is a new feature that Microsoft announced at Ignite a month ago. And then we have Benjamin Clements, a very close partner of DataON, and he's going to share some of the exciting stuff he's doing with Azure Percept. Whatever he could share, he'll share, which is essentially bringing AI to the edge with GPU, which is another thing that Microsoft announced. So a lot of stuff we talk about today is going to be technical, talk about the usage case and usage model that our customer are using across the board. Given this is a holiday spirit and a holiday party, throughout the day, I'm going to give away a $100 Amazon card for fun of it. Whatever it is, we'll do a nomination, we'll pick someone for an Amazon card, and we're going to give it away. And just because that's how holiday is, and I'm excited about it. For those who's new to this virtual meetup, everybody on this meeting are customers, are users that want to know more about Azure Stack HCI Microsoft, or actually have a Azure Stack HCI deployed with Windows Server 16, 19, or the new Azure Stack OS. So this is a group of people that will share the good, bad, any difference about Microsoft. And do not feel you have any reservation for asking any type of question you want. Any question you ask on this forum, we'll try our best to answer. Because at the end of the day, I want to make sure it's very true to the core, which is try to be as honest about a solution. Because nothing's perfect. And DataON, being who we are, has always been there to make sure that the good time and the bad time, we're there with you to help you with your infrastructure and solution across the board. Alan, maybe you do a quick introduction.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Yes, so my name is Ellen Kirby. I'm a senior program manager on the Azure customer and partner engineering team. I focus a lot on our customer engagements and early adopter programs for our hybrid solutions. So that includes, of course, Azure Stack HCI, but we also spend a lot of time in the weeds with AKS on HCI, as well as all those wonderfully rich Arc-enabled features we're starting to light up, so that we can create this end-to-end solution for customers to be able to drive toward edge adoption and being able to modernize their workloads.
Thank you. Ernie?
Hi, everyone. I'm Ernie Costa. I am I'm an engineer at Commvault, working for our internal IT department. Not really working on the product itself, but more handling our system services internal for our worldwide customers. I'm part of that early adopter program that Ellen just mentioned for a couple different products that Microsoft has been testing over the past couple years. AVD on HCI is the newest and coolest thing I'm kind of playing with today. Hope to show you a couple cool things with it.
Thank you. Benjamin, quick intro.
Sure, Benjamin Clements, President of Strategic Online Systems, Inc. And we're just real excited to be here and be close partners with DataON and with Microsoft. And so I'm going to be covering something that there's going to be more and more announcements coming, but I'm going to show just a couple of things that I can show about it and why I'm so excited about this. And honestly, I may have never been more excited about technology in my 25-year career. So
that's awesome. So the agenda is Alan will start. Is that how it works? Yeah. Alan, show yours.
Hey, before we get started,
Okay.
just for all those people that just joined late, we're giving away DataON t-shirts. So if that's something that you'd like to get, make sure you put your name and email address into the chat window, and we'll follow up and get one to you.
All right. Alan, tell us what's new.
Great. So I'm going to throw up some slides. For those of you that had the opportunity to attend some of our Ignite sessions, this will just be as quick as I can a recap, because I definitely want to make sure our time today gets spent on these amazing demos that both Ernie and Benjamin have ready for you guys. So please let me know, can you guys see my screen okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Fantastic. So let's just talk through a couple of the new features. Just from a timing perspective, actually tomorrow will be a year that we made Azure Stack HCI 20H2 generally available to the population. So we're actually about to celebrate our birthday tomorrow. And prior to our Ignite releases, we've actually updated all of the features and functionality in Azure Stack HCI to be included in a 21H2 release, which actually came out at the end of October. So what I'm going to spend a few minutes talking to you all about today are these new features and functionalities that we've brought to the product as we've done that availability update release about 6 weeks ago. So one thing to keep in mind is for those of you that have been testing and validating the product, there are some really key improvements, including something called natively enabled Arc on an Azure Stack HCI solution to really drive that hybrid model and to start pulling away from that traditional Windows Server deployment and see that value in what Azure Stack HCI is uniquely bringing to your story. So let's talk just for a few minutes about the workloads and benefits that you have available with Azure Stack HCI. So now that we've released 21H2, we are really trying to create this better together strategy where we're focusing in on Azure as a control plane solution through Arc and having the componentries of Windows Server Azure Edition and being able to leverage some of the expansive functionality around all these different solutions that you can run on top of Azure Stack HCI. So that first one on that list, I think, is really interesting to think about, and that's Windows Server 2022 Azure Edition. Many of you may have heard that we've got some feature functionality coming to Azure only VMs, and that's going to include something that I think we are all really excited about, which is hot patching. What we're doing is we're actually extending that capability to run on top of Azure Stack HCI. So when you want to deploy an Azure only edition of a virtual machine to run that guest workload, you can do that with Windows Server Azure Edition on top of your HCI solution. And that's exclusive to the Azure Stack componentry as opposed to a Windows Server deployment that you might have been running your hypervisor technology on. So that's some of that new feature functionality that we're bringing to the product. You'll notice underneath there's a line item about Azure Extended Network. That's something that's really exciting too, because for those of us having been a prior customer that have to deal with DR strategy and how you move your IP schemes around, we're really trying to simplify that down for you and create a better experience when it comes to running workloads on customized operating systems designed to run in Azure, and with that, Azure Stack HCI as an extension. I'm going to flip over and talk for just a second about the extended security updates. Many of you may have actually started looking at Azure Stack HCI because of the ability to run end-of-life workloads, and that included Windows Server 2008 R2. One of the things I wanted to bring up is we're not that far away from 2012 R2 being end-of-life. So as you start thinking about the workloads that you have running in your environment today, moving those workloads, those legacy workloads, to an Azure Stack HCI solution actually will extend the amount of time that you have security support to meet your audit and security requirements on an Azure Stack solution. So that is something to just consider. And then the third one is we've continued to add new functionality to how you license your virtual machine. So we're really trying to simplify that down. So we've deployed out AVMA, which allows us to do automatic virtual machine activation. And in that sense, you can actually do it in a couple different methods. You can use a key that gets entered into the host, or you can do add-on subscriptions. And I see John has his hand raised, so I'm going to let John talk for a second. Only John's muted.
Total accident. Accident.
All good? I was about to say, uh-oh, did I spill the beans? I promise this is all good stuff. So another workload that we have new for Azure Stack HCI, and this is where Ernie's going to be spending his time with you today, is Azure Virtual Desktop for Azure Stack HCI. This is one that's extremely near and dear to my heart because I spend a lot of time talking to some of you that are on the call today about your needs to run hybrid virtualized workloads for virtual desktops. And it was a very challenging story at the beginning of COVID because as customers sent employees home, they started to spin up virtual desktops on an AVD at the time, WVD deployments, and found that there were certainly things that didn't always work as well. Maybe it was a latency issue or a data sovereignty issue. There were a lot of different reasons why when you're looking at how you're deploying your environments, you might need to keep virtualized desktops on premise. So we're really excited about the functionality we're bringing in extending that control plane for Azure Virtual Desktop to being able to manage host pools that live on your Azure Stack HCI environment. So very excited to have Ernie show you guys a demo, as he's been one of our early adopter customers who's actually been testing our private preview of the Azure Virtual Desktop solution. Additionally to that, we continue to make improvements to our Azure Kubernetes services that run on top of Azure Stack HCI. So this is a wall of words, but I'll certainly be more than happy to share the slide deck with folks that attend the call. But if you look through some of the things that we've got out here, there are definitely some great improvements coming to the product. One of the ones I'm very excited about is some of the lifecycle management that we're adding to the Kubernetes service on top of Azure Stack HCI. And additionally to that, I think another one that's really valuable to think about is the GPU support. And I'll mention that in just a second as we talk about our expanding GPU support for HCI specifically. So this is a nice little screen that shows all of these different rich platform services that we're bringing to Azure Stack HCI. So you can see some of them are in preview and some of them are actually in full production. An example of one that we're seeing a lot of traction on now is the ability to run Sql Manage Instances. So when you're thinking about that end-to-end strategy and your layered approach, and you're starting at that wonderful DataON gear that you've got, and then you've loaded Azure Stack HCI as your solution on top, it integrates natively into your Arc control plane. And now you can start leveraging AKS HCI, and from that point, put data services on top of that containerization story. And that now allows you to create some very unique SQL managed instances that allow you built-in capabilities to really modernize your SQL-based workloads. And we're also working towards supporting Postgres as well. Additionally to that, you can see we're adding app services, functions, logical applications, a lot of API management coming to the product. So it's extremely exciting to see all of these wonderful features that we want to lay on top of the product so that our customers have a lot of flexibility on how and when and where they run their workloads. So just a quick review. Again, we have a bunch of opportunity to continue to utilize Windows Server as the best of breed guest operating system with the extended support and our pay-as-you-go model for Azure licensing. We've also got, again, continued improvements for our containerization story with Azure Kubernetes services, those additional platform-based services that are coming to the product and are already being deployed. And then, of course, Azure Virtual Desktop to really help you drive that end-to-end story and flexibility. And one of the things that we didn't mention that I'm sure Ernie's going to show you with Azure Virtual Desktop is there's this great ability to be very hybrid in your strategy. And coming from an environment where workers might need certain access to certain resources, this will give you some flexibility to potentially run some of your workforce in Azure and some of your workforce on premise while keeping that control plane the same, which is, I think, something a lot of us have been striving toward for a long time in terms of how do I get all of these things solved while simplifying the customer and user experience. So I am going to hit for just a minute or two on our Azure management and governance and the improvements we've been making to that. So Azure Stack HCI is integrating with Azure Resource Manager. So of course, we now have a lot of great management tools, including the ability to take a look at your resources right from, you can see this mobile device, who knows if it's an iPhone or an Android, no telling here, but you can actually take a look and manage and monitor your environment straight from your mobile device. And we are adding continued improvements to that, including some functionality with being able to support some Windows Admin Center capabilities up in Azure directly as well. So there's a lot of content that's coming to the product that allows you to really take Azure Arc to the next level and utilize that to manage not just one cluster, but at a large fleet scale deployment. And of course, we want to be thinking about how we are doing these management extensions. So we want to be able to stay in the Azure portal. We want to be able to make everything we do cluster aware. We want to be intent based. We want to have really good lifecycle management of our capabilities. So it's extremely exciting to see all the effort that is underway to add extensions, to add support, to think in terms of, and I think the best way I've heard it referred to is how do we get to simplification? How do we get to a point as a customer supporting our user base where we don't need 10 different products to monitor and manage our environment? How do we get there in one place where we can simply manage our systems and be very proactive? Because I know as a consumer of these resources, I always was thinking about how do I keep my folks up less at night? How do I get to a point where we can really maintain uptime and be secure in our environments? And that's a lot of the drive and direction we're taking with modernizing our products and providing better and more robust management features. So one last thing I want to mention on the management capabilities that we're adding to the product is the multi-cluster monitoring in the Azure portal. And for those of you that haven't had an opportunity to take a look at that, it's really customizable. That's one of the really great things about doing this all from Azure and our log analytics capabilities is you can create custom workbooks that shows exactly what you need to see for your environment. So you can see the mock-up here that we have. We're looking at things like the total health and the different individual nodes and their utilization of resources, but you can get very granular. And if I had boatloads of time, I would bring up my demo environment and show you guys how I've customized it so that I can look at very specific things across all my nodes and my clusters so that I understand what's going on and can be reactive very quickly and benefit toward that proactive stance that you get from being really on top of the ball when it comes to monitoring. And then you can look at persona-based monitoring where if you have a CIO that needs to come in and look at your environment, they can see very specific things. And if you have a different lens that you want to view when you're looking at the resources in your environment, you can customize those things to really provide the best sort of content to the right people that are digesting it. So again, we've got some really great roadmap that is something we're really looking forward to continuing to providing to you all. And that's, again, improvements to monitoring, improvements to management, the WAC-in portal experience that we're actually testing in our early adopter program right now and have gotten some tremendously great feedback on, allowing customers to be able to just use Azure as that landing page and not have to worry about making VPN connections and doing different extra steps in order to manage their ecosystem. Additionally to that, we're also previewing Auto Manage, which is starting to tie together that lifecycle management and allow you a lot of flexibility when it comes to how are you going to manage the end-to-end experience of how you're supporting all of your operating systems and how are you maintaining desired state configuration at scale. So very exciting stuff coming there. Of course, more improvements that we're bringing to this Azure disaster recovery capabilities. We're continuing to add more functionality to that. We already have a pretty decent footprint in terms of how you can support and use Microsoft Azure backup solutions to be able to integrate an Azure Stack HCI solution into an Azure experience for a disaster recovery and backup solution. And then we're adding additional feature functionality to PowerShell as well. So again, you can see on the screen, we are constantly moving, constantly adding more, getting that customer signal from conversations with folks like you guys in our early adopter program and other strategic opportunities to make sure that we're driving toward what you guys need as opposed to what we might think is cool. One thing I did want to show you guys really quickly was we are also bringing and adding that capability of being able to do VM self-service. Some of that is kind of a layered approach that we're adding that actually allows us to light up features like Azure Virtual Desktop, but the ability to actually deploy virtual machines from the Azure portal through Azure Arc is something that we are in private preview on and are looking forward to expanding out to public availability into calendar year 2022. So you can see we are really growing the capabilities of being able to provision and manage virtual machines from the Azure portal. So thinking about Arc as that control plane and really getting to a point where you can do all your day-to-day management and deployment from the Arc interface, but have that really stable and reliable architecture in your data center on the form of Azure Stack HCI to support those solutions and needs. And again, like I mentioned before, we do have support for Azure Backup and Azure Site Recovery. So we included with MABS v3 UR2 the ability to back up Azure Stack HCI as the host solution and the VMs that are running on top of it in your Azure Stack HCI cluster. We also have, of course, Azure Site Recovery. So that Hyper-V to Azure scenario that we have got a lot of documentation around, we're supporting and continuing to grow capability with the general availability of it for 21H2. And then the last thing I want to talk to you guys about, because I'm really trying to be cognizant of making sure Ben and Ernie get lots of good time, is the infrastructure innovations that we're putting into the product. So you may be aware of some of these, and some of these may be surprising, but we are adding functionality to the product, especially things that we've determined from supporting the infrastructure hardware that runs Azure itself, where we can benefit and improve with adding things like kernel soft reboot and adding things like dynamic CPU compatibility so that you can grow your clusters and be able to add to those functionalities, and most importantly, to simplify and maintain uptime. Another piece that got a lot of excitement was the announcement around GPU support for AI and ML workloads. That is really focused in on the DDA capabilities of a GPU deployment. So we have functionality now from within Windows Admin Center to be able to manage and utilize GPUs for your workloads on Azure Stack HCI, and are working toward our goal of adding the partitioning capabilities in a GPU deployment that will then allow us to be able to really break out how and where you deploy your GPU resources across the virtual machines and other resources like Kubernetes that are running in your clusters. Again, hitting on the thin provisioning improvements that we brought to the product, which I'm sure John could talk a lot about as well, and our network ATC so that we can continue to think about streamlining how you deploy your network architecture and making it more simplified. And then, of course, Secure Core. How do we focus in on improving our security posture in that walled garden approach, where we can add layers of capability and security to provide you a solution that you can feel confident in? So again, there's a lot of work and effort going into continuing to improve the product. We're not just deploying out updates every year and sitting back and looking at what's going on in the world. We're really thinking about what's next, what can we continue to do, where is our customer signal telling us that we need to continue to improve the products. So again, I mentioned those GPU workloads, but this is just a nice little screen that shows where we are in our GPU story and how we're continuing to evolve it. And then finally, I'll hit one last slide, which is our review. We're adding additional capabilities for workloads and benefits from the licensing perspective to AVD. We're continuing to improve our management and governance capabilities, that Arc-enabled functionality and Arc-enabling your VMs on top of your clusters really start to tie together all those layers of capability around how you are resourcing your environment and how you're managing it at scale. And then finally, of course, our infrastructure improvements. How do we continue to add more capabilities with the GPU support, with restart capabilities, with kernel soft reboot, thin provisioning, intent-driven ATC clustered networking? Lots and lots of work happening in the dev and engineering teams to continue to add more functionality to these products. We're excited about it. We're really looking forward to what we're bringing to you in 2022, and certainly would love to hear your feedback. So please, by all means, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or follow-up. I'm certainly happy to help, and I'm positive the team at DataON can sync you up with me if you can't find me on your own. So thank you guys all for your time today. I tried to do that as quickly as I could so that I can make sure that you get to see all this great content from Ernie and Benjamin.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you for summarizing the entire Ignite 2 days in 15 minutes. You did an incredible, great job. I got to draw one question before we go to Ernie. Any end user customer, can someone help answer what's the difference between Azure Stack HCI OS versus Windows Server 2019 or 22 OS? End user, please. And $100 Amazon card for those 2 answers. Raise your hand. Speak up.
Repeat the question.
What's the difference between Azure Stack HCI OS versus Windows Server Data Center Edition OS running HCI?
Right now, very little. Oh, don't get me started on that. I got every one of these features running on 2022.
That's a wrong answer, Amy.
Give me another end user. Give me a better one. Yeah,
I would tell you the answer, but I just asked Ben, so I know what the answer is now.
Who is it? Who's talking?
Matt Lehman.
Matt, go answer it. Try it.
It's not fair because I just asked Ben Milborn what the difference was.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't
I
matter.
have an inside answer.
The inside. Oh, Adam, raise your hand. Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah. So essentially, it's a stripped down version of Windows Server. It has basically all the Hyper-V features, clustering features, and things like that without all of the extra stuff.
And it's a separate OS where
separate OS, yes.
You provision as a $10 per core Azure services, and it continue to innovate on a much more high cadence in terms of new feature versus the Windows Server 2-year roadmap. Yep. S2D, all these features still in Windows Server, but however, as a directional thing, really want to build a hybrid environment. Azure Stack HCI OS is kind of the direction that we like our customer go on, and Microsoft too, because you're adding a lot of new capability and services like AVD, Kubernetes, all these other stuff on top of it, where it's not supported in Windows Server like Stretch Cluster. So Adam, $100 Amazon card just for you for answering that.
So thank you, Howard, but there's more.
Oh,
so
okay.
Don't forget about the licensing. The licensing is totally different.
That's right.
And it's through the Azure licensing portal. So you have to make sure that the licensing is correct. It's core only, command line only, Windows Admin Center managed. So yeah, that's it.
And
I think
that's a really big thing too, because they're switching out a lot of the programs out. Open Business is going away, and they're switching to CSP model and a lot of stuff, open value subscription. So there's a lot to consider, and this is if you're going this route, that's definitely the path to go down.
There's also the support aspect to it, and I'm sure a lot of us have dealt with, I see a lot of shaking heads, a lot of us have dealt with Premier support in some capacity over the years, whether we have a contract or you have to open up, what is it, like a $500 per ticket thing. That's not really a thing with this. You get your basic Azure support like you would with any Azure resource. Obviously, the SLA may be a little bit different if you don't have Premier support, but there is that benefit to treating this like any other true Azure service. And I will also say and Ellen, you can cover your ears, not that you're on the support side, but we've all dealt with some bad support experiences with whomever we get with Premier support. If you have an issue with whatever thing in server you may be experiencing, you're going to get better support with this. And I'm not saying that as a Microsoft fanboy. You're going to get the folks that are working on the bleeding edge tech. That's going to be in the faster releases because the cadence cycle is much faster with Azure Stack HCI. So there's that value add to it. I've personally have had significantly better success with that support channel. Take it at face value, but it is something to keep in mind.
Thank you, Ernie. The forum is yours now.
You have me all worked up now.
I like
stressed out. All right, so Ellen kind of touched on a boatload of things that have been announced and released in the past couple weeks. Before we get started on AVD, I just want to know, it looks like a few people understand how the team's little voting hands up, hands down thing works. How many people use some capacity, some VDI thing in their workforce? Like who, whether it was before COVID, after COVID, like just in general, who is using some kind of virtual desktop infrastructure, whether it's AVD, it's Citrix based, whatever. All right, so we see it looks like more than about 10, 11. People know what it is. People use it, know what it is. We all kind of know what Windows Virtual Desktops was. It's now called AVD. traditional Azure VMs created in the cloud, you're added to a session host pool in Azure, where then you can assign Azure AD users to a pool. If those VMs were attached to a virtual network that had some way to reach back to your on-prem data center, whether that's through some like IPsec tunnel, some VPN tunnel, or express route, they had the ability to get into stuff on-prem. But there's obviously a latency issue there because the VMs live over in a Microsoft data center and your stuff is on your, in your own location. So there's a couple different setups. Traditionally, you had your simple setup where it's just a Windows desktop in the cloud, no connectivity back to the central office or data center. File sharing was probably handled through like OneDrive or Azure Files or some other solution, maybe like NetApp Files. And then user profiles could be configured, just to be traditional one-to-one, lives on the machine assigned to the user, or if you were doing shared session pools, you could leverage something like FS Logics to handle that roaming profile through a mounted VHDX file. And then obviously the fancier setups are what I mentioned before: VPN, express route back to your own data center, and then you can you're just limited by the speed of light depending on how that is. And that solved problems for a lot of people in the early days of COVID, especially when there was, working from home, supply chain shortages. Basically people kicked out of the office. They needed to access their stuff that used to be on-prem, but maybe businesses didn't have access to laptops to send out to everyone because everyone in the world was hoarding toilet paper and memory chips. Folks like that work at my company, we have a lot of data sovereignty and something called data gravity issues. And that's a term I recently learned about. I knew what it was, but I never knew that it was a coined, defined term, data gravity. And when you try to explain those things to executives, they may kind of look at you like, why does that even matter? Data gravity is when you have systems that live somewhere that are so important and critical to maintaining business continuity, maybe like a CRM system or a data warehouse or large SQL Server stamp, you tend to build all your systems to kind of talk to those things. So maybe your finance department has to do a bunch of work local to SQL Server. You don't want them accessing that SQL Server thing from something that lives in a data center halfway across the world. Data gravity. So low latency is important, access time is important. Being able to say I have complete control and ownership of the actual bits is really important. And obviously the cost and spend with all those things come along with it. So you don't want to be spending $1,500, $2,000, $3,000 on laptops for each individual person if you don't really have to, especially if you had those resources maybe on-prem already. So that's where my user story with AVD on Azure Stack HCI came in. You can, again, if you're familiar with AVD, you're going to be using the same single pane of glass that you're already familiar with in the public Azure portal. I'm going to share my screen in a few minutes, give you a little tour. It's the same. If you've already used AVD, the users are going to be familiar with it. If they've ever used a VDI solution in general that used session brokers or remote desktop gateway, it's going to look a little familiar to them too. What's really cool is I'm one of only a few people to handle this. So I also don't need to worry about managing the infrastructure with AVD. My dog's barking at me in the background, so if you hear anything, I'm sorry. You don't need to manage your remote desktop gateways. You don't need to manage session brokers hosts. You don't need to manage license servers. You're basically just spinning up VMs on an HCI cluster. You're installing 2 agents to get them added to a session pool, and you're done. That's it. You don't even need to have a VPN tunnel to your infrastructure because the Azure backplane, the way the agents connect back, basically handle that for you. So full disclosure, I'm using this in production right now for a group of users. There's going to be some things I show you that are going to be either pixelated or I'm not actually going to show you the Azure portal and maybe a screenshot with some things blurred out. You're going to have to use your imagination or trust me on some things. I have a blog with a bunch of screenshots that kind of walk through how to set this up on your own. The only prereqs are, like I said, you have to have an Azure Stack HCI cluster that exists somewhere. It could be a 1-node guy. It could be something running in demo mode. It could be an eval mode. And then you need to have a some form of VM that's running on that cluster. It could be Windows 10 or 11 Enterprise. It could be Windows 10 or 11 multi-session mode. If you don't know what that is, it's Windows 10 or 11 that multiple people can be logged into it at the same time. Or it can be Windows Server VM, traditional 2019, 2022, whatever. You also need to obviously have Active Directory on-prem and Azure AD synchronization of some type happening as well, so that the users, they can log in with their Azure AD account, and the SSO side of things can kind of just work. All right, I'm gonna flip my notes over here for a minute, and I think I can request control, or does someone on the DataON side need to do that for me?
I'll give it to you. Just have to share.
Oh, I see. Yeah. I'm sorry. I've never actually presented.
Little arrow on the right.
Yep, I got it. I got to select the right tab.
Yep.
And Howard, I'm going to drag the Teams window over so I can see your beautiful face too while I do this. All right. So
private browsing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I am purposely in a brand new incognito window here. Just pretending, because I'm going to show the whole experience, soup to nuts. Pretend I'm a user in my finance department. MS Office, maybe I run some Excel spreadsheets that have ODBC connections to SQL Server that are on-prem, or like an old thick client type of thing, maybe like Sage, Mass 500, just something that like you tend to run into a lot in businesses that have been around forever. Old accounting software, all pretty standard user stories. Nothing that's crazy taxing on the system. We're not doing, crazy CAD design on here. So we can shove a bunch of these users on a single VM because they're only going to use a gig or two of resources. CPU is not going to be that intensive. But like I said, the most important thing is having that information local. So, looks like, there we go. All right. So I'm clicking on I had a bookmark right up for my, my AVD login. I'll log in with my account. I'm getting MFA prompted in a second, which is cool thing number one. By using this, you're automatically going to get all the benefits of Azure AD and all the conditional access, PIM, just-in-time stuff that you just naturally get with Azure AD. I've already gone out and created these things. I'm going to show you what that looks like once I'm done with this. I have two different workspaces assigned to me, Costa. Like I said, I'm in finance in this demo. So this is my desktop session pool that is for the finance users. I'm also using the HTML5 client here. What's beneficial about this is if you have a user that maybe has like a machine they can't install stuff on, or let's say they have a Chromebook, or they're trying to do something from a phone browser. You can come up with all these weird user stories for this, but the HTML5 experience for this is super helpful, just for like that mobility purpose. You don't need to really, you're sitting at a hotel, using the business center. You just need to get online real quick and look at something. So click on my assigned workspace. It's going to ask what do I want to share. I'm just going to allow all of this. And again, I'm on a machine right now that's not VPN'd into my Commvault network in any capacity. So this is already prompt me for my, I can type right. This is prompting me for my login. And I'm already getting assigned a machine, and it's mounting my profile right now to a VM that's sitting in my data center on-prem. And VDI isn't really like showing you things that you could do inside this VM. It's not really going to be that cool. Like I can launch Outlook, I can launch Teams, I can launch Excel. It's one of those you're gonna have to trust me and use your imagination with what's going on here. But this is a straight up VM that's running on some ancient hardware in my data center that I'm accessing completely over Azure's network. Just to show you, I mean, this is an HTML5 client. I'm able to go to YouTube. I can launch a video, and the actual quality is pretty decent. All because of the until Chrome crashes. Maybe I should have used Edge. But in terms of compression and user experience, it's pretty solid, it's pretty decent, it's pretty fluid. You'll see Teams is loading in the background. There are some things you need to keep in mind with this type of VDI setup for users, and that really focuses in on user profile disks and things like that. And that's a discussion that is in any VDI environment, whether it's Citrix, whether it's AVD, whether it's traditional VDI. And you can see some DataON messages are actually coming up because I'm logged into Teams on this machine now. FS Logics allows you to redirect your user profiles across session hosts anywhere. In this example, I have this environment set up that my FS Logics profile shares are mounting a SMB share from Azure Storage. Uses SMB. I have some firewall ports open with my networking team that allow that magic to happen. But basically, if I were to go to my user downloads and save a file there, or if I were to make some files in my documents, it would get redirect. It would follow me around, so that if I logged off this session host and logged into it later on and was assigned a completely different VM, I would obviously see those files there. And that speaks to what Ellen was mentioning earlier about some cool things you could do with hybrid mobility here and planning for high availability and disaster recovery. This is answering a niche use case where you need to be hyper local to your workplace and environment and data that you're manipulating. But let's say we know this all happens. Your Azure Stack HCI cluster goes down. You know, maybe there's a storage issue or a power outage in the rack that it's mounted in. And you have 50, 100 users that now all of a sudden are down. You could have a whole nother session pool spun up in traditional AVD that those session hosts are also configured to use FS Logics and also configured to use that SMB share I just mentioned. And the data is in Azure. Your user profile data is in Azure. It will mount and they will get the same experience. Obviously, the session host pool needs to have the same software installed for them to use, but that kind of business continuity checkbox is answered there. If you don't have a second data center to spin this up in, or if you don't have the ability to buy multiple clusters from Howard and have stretch clustering or whatever it may be. So the possibilities are kind of endless, and not to take away from AVD on HCI, but if you're already invested in Citrix, your user profiles are, if you're using FS Logics, you're kind of already halfway there. There's not much reconfiguring to go on. You're just leveraging the existing shares. All right, so I rambled for a bit. This is what it looks like in an HTML5 client. I'm not really going to bore you with what you could do inside here, but I am going to show you what it looks like now behind the scenes, at least from like the Azure portal perspective. I'm already logged into Azure. This is going to bring me hopefully to my, brings me to my resource group where all this stuff lives. You can see here I have, and maybe I'll filter this just to make it a little, that's all right. Not even going to worry. You're going to see here I have a bunch of Azure Arc registered servers. I have a couple storage accounts here, and then I have your typical AVD stuff, host pool, workspace, yada yada. Then my Azure Stack HCI cluster is also here as well. I'm going to launch another bookmark of a screenshot. If I were to be actually on my underlying infrastructure right now, this is what it looks like. This is my Azure Stack HCI view of VMs in Windows Admin Center. I have a handful of VMs, a couple called Fin01, Fin02, a couple other ones called Bats 1, 2, and 3. You guys don't need to worry about what those names are, but you'll see that those are registered servers that are registered through Azure Arc. And then if I were to click into my my actual host group, and if you're familiar with AVD already, this is exactly the same view. If I click on virtual machines here, it's going to look like this. Again, I have to blur a couple things out. Unfortunately, it shows the fully qualified domain, and I kind of have to protect a few things of my company's security perspective. But you would see this host pool, the session host pool, has these two VMs in it that have been registered. And while Ellen was talking before, I actually spun up a third one on another laptop that I could quickly install the two agents on and it would eventually just show up here within maybe like 30 seconds. A third VM would show up here, and that would be that. And again, if you're familiar with that AVD workflow, it's the same thing. It's the same pane of glass. You get the same options of configuring your remote desktop properties, configuring your load balancing algorithms, either breadth first or depth first, depending on how you want to assign VMs, how many sessions per VM you would even allow through the session broker behind the scenes. If you are using MSIX packages, so if you're capturing installations of software because you want to lock down what users can do, you can leverage that here too. And I already mentioned FS Logics. That's something that is kind of independent from this pane of glass. It's mostly just registry settings that you're configuring on the VMs. It all just works exactly the same. So we've spoken about kind of what that user experience UI looks like, kind of what it looks like behind the scenes from a systems administrator point of view. What I do want to talk though about is kind of just why would you even use AVD on HCI other than those 2 points I brought up earlier: data governance and or data sovereignty and data gravity. I mentioned one earlier. One of them is the possibility of DR capabilities. Another one that I'm gonna kind of put Ellen on the spot because she specifically mentioned GPUs. There's a major cost associated to running GPU workloads in public Azure. And if you're familiar with it, Azure charges per hour that a VM's running, and for VDI environments, most of the time they're running anywhere from 8 to 24 hours a day. So when you add a GPU to that, and if you need a boatload of RAM, that gets really expensive really fast. So if you're able to be lucky and get your hands on some GPUs on-prem and they're server compatible, you can install those GPUs in your Azure Stack HCI hardware. And currently right now, you can do a one-to-one assignment with DDA and have that single VM basically passing through to that single GPU. And with Windows 10 or Windows 11 multi-session, well, now all of a sudden you're able to have 10, 20, 30 users all leveraging, I mean, obviously depending on your workload, all leveraging that single GPU that you have there. Or if you have multiple VMs and multiple GPUs, you could scale out from there. But like I said, I know that there are some interesting things on the roadmap. They just recently announced GPU failover. So if the VM moves to another host in the cluster, it'll mount automatically. I know that Windows 10 has had some recent improvements in the GPU partitioning workspace, and I know that is something that Microsoft is actively working on right now. I don't know if and when that'll come to the enterprise grade side of things, but if it does, that would be a huge lifesaver for folks that are doing maybe CAD workloads or graphics design, things that people are manipulating massive files that need to be local, and you can't spin them up in the cloud because of that latency concern, that speed of light issue. So, those are some solutions that would be, major check marks if you had to go up to your boss or you had to come up with a reason.
So Ernie, I can give you a 2-minute count. I want to make sure I leave enough time for Benjamin.
Absolutely, and I'm just about done with my rambling. Like I said, I'm one person handling this. I don't personally have time to manage infrastructure, manage session hosts, manage everything else. So this product, when it goes GA, is going to be that killer app for Azure Stack HCI. It's gonna answer a lot of questions for folks that don't want to deal with managing a half dozen VMs to basically do something that I showed you is just click and you're logged in. If anyone, I've seen a bunch of questions come through. I'm sure the folks.
We'll get to the question towards the end. For all those questions, DataON or Microsoft, feel free to respond just via the chat, and we'll answer it towards the end. I'm excited as you, Ernie. That's why I asked you to come on, because you're early as always, and I see this towards the middle of next year become the mainstream driver for people looking at Azure Stack HCI. I think it's a killer workload. I think it's going to be a game changer, so I'm excited as well. With that, thank you so much, Ernie. Stay on. Ben, pass it to you.
Okay, thanks. Hold on just a second. Tesla, will you pull over here? I'm sorry, I've got to. Yeah. Hold on a second, guys. Yeah, just pull over right over there. Yeah, that's good. That's good. So the reason I bring up the Tesla, okay, I'm excited also, like what Ernie was talking about, a game changer. I'm real excited as well, and I need to first kind of convey part of my excitement. And I want you to think about the first time that you drove a Tesla. Now, if you haven't driven a Tesla, then I need you to go to the Tesla dealership and use the DataON referral link at the bottom of the screen. No. Anyway, so Arlen and I went to see our good friend Howard, and Howard picked us up in the Tesla. And I had said, you know, my kids have told me about it. I don't know a whole lot about this. And he said, well, then you need to drive it. So I got in, I stepped on the accelerator. And so think about the first time you stepped on this accelerator on the Tesla, and I felt like I was no longer driving a car. Instead, I went to Disney World and went to test track because it's immediate going 0 to 60. No effort. The tires didn't spin out. It did it so quietly, you know, and for the first time in a car, it's like the world blurred out on the sides. And so that's what it felt like. I was just driving it to my wife. You know, everything was a blur. And for those magical 3 or 4 seconds, man, I was like, okay. And so I told her, I no longer want a Corvette. I no longer want a midlife crisis of a Corvette. I want a Tesla. Okay. Then he shows me the autopilot. So I'd never seen anything like this. I'd read about it. He showed it to me, and what companies are advertising on TV right now of, hey, you can take your hands off the wheel, and they're bragging about it. Well, Tesla's been doing this for how many years? 8 years, or maybe even the whole existence. Their cruise control is exactly that. You know, you set the cruise control, and it's not just the accelerator. It's not just how fast you're going. It's the speed of traffic. It's maintaining your lane without a whole lot of interaction. Okay, so again, I come home and I say, this changes everything. And I don't look at cars the same. Now, before this experience, I didn't even realize what car manufacturers were trying to do. And so let me take it back 100 years. When people were on a horse and cart, their cruise control was that the horse wouldn't hit the horse in front of them. And the horse was smart enough to kind of follow the path, okay? But all these car dealerships had just kind of given up, and it was too hard, so we didn't even know what we needed. And then Tesla changes the game and says, we're going to create that experience of taking you down a path, and we're going to create an experience that you don't have this hesitation when you put on the gas, okay? So what does this have to do with anything? Well, in my 25 years of being in this industry, I don't think I've ever been more excited. Now, S2D came very close in 2016, where Microsoft brought SAN level storage to the masses. But this probably tops it. And I'll tell you why. And I will say this, I can't show everything because some things are coming. But what I will share is what was announced at Microsoft Ignite. So let me take you to a business need that I think is kind of in a similar state where, and so let me talk about video cameras. So all organizations have video cameras, surveillance, monitoring, whatever you want to call it, different use cases. You know, some people say, hey, we need it for security, either externally. We need it for efficiency of making sure that, you know, these assembly lines are doing correct or working correctly. We need them for safety around heavy equipment or accountability for people going in and out of rooms. And, you know, we've all seen the the movies where somebody gets into the wrong data center and sneaks in. Well, they're always alerted by the key card, and then they confirm it by the video camera, and that should tell us something. And in fact, when we're talking about all these video cameras, so let me share my screen real quick. We always see screens like this. So it's a huge wall of screens, and not a whole lot of people have this many screens and set up this nicely. And I believe that's 73 screens right there. Well, I know a lot of organizations who have a whole lot more than 73 screens, and yet it takes up that much real estate to show that many screens. So as a general, every organization I talk to has huge needs for video cameras. These needs, kind of like what Tesla is doing, these needs have been unmet for so many years that all of us have forgotten, that we even have those needs or even would like to meet those needs. So, all these organizations, are kind of using it for liability purposes. We record videos or research after the fact. We hear about something happening and then we go and research it. So I'm kind of comparing it to electric cars because, and I'm going to place a date on myself, tell how old I am. In my middle school, we had a science book, and it said by the year 1990, 50% of all the cars would be electric. Well, we know how well that turned out. And there was also several articles about, self-driving cars would be very common by 2010. And of course, we know how well that turned out. And so, that same type of thing, unmet needs that were so far off, they were unreachable that people just kind of gave up. Companies just gave up. So basically the response to, all these video needs, basically organizations kind of take one of two different approaches. Either they are basically very reactive, so they're recording for liability. Yeah, they may kind of monitor with a staff or two, but they have this for for liability, or they do it for just after the fact. Okay, so then your alternative is, well, we want it to be live, so we place staff to watch these cameras. So if you think about what the screen is I'm showing you, how many people would it actually take to see certain things going on? Yeah, if there's nobody in the picture and all of a sudden somebody shows up, Tom Cruise from Mission Impossible shows up, yeah, it's the only person there. But how many of our videos is there nothing going on? That's just simple motion detection. And so basically all of the tools that we've been using for those workarounds have been, let's help this by using motion detectors and bounding boxes. That's kind of what like Ring Camera did. And Ring Camera kind of changed our doorbells forever. They have a bounding box that you say, show me any activity within this bounding box. And oh yeah, show me what a person looks like. So it kind of generically looks through, and you look at it, and it's helpful. It's not going to tell you a whole lot, but it does tell you a person's at your front door. So it's helpful, but it's limited what it can do, and you can't say, I'm not just looking for a person. I'm looking for a person doing something. Well, so how are we going to take that from videos for liability purposes, videos for research after the fact, and possibly we could luck out, and if somebody's watching one of these cameras, hey, maybe we could do something with it. What if we could create data from video? And I'm not just talking about to make an alert, but actually create data that we could actually see what's going on, that we could all of a sudden have a totally new, different source of information into our organization, regardless of what you're using the streams for, using our existing cameras. And then what if we could do it on, 200 cameras at a time. Something that a single person, there's no way a single person could be watching, honestly, how could a person be watching any more in depth of than 5 or 10 of these streams of if there's other activity going on? So I don't know if you noticed, but there was an announcement at Ignite, and it may have just gone kind of past a lot of people, but Mo Tanabian, I'm sorry Mo, I messed up your last name. He made a huge announcement. It was a co-announcement with NVIDIA, and I'll tell you in just a second why that co-announcement is so important. They made this co-announcement talking about bringing Azure Percept to Azure Stack HCI. So real quick, before I tell a little bit more, and again, I can't get into too many details, but so the history of Percept. So Microsoft brought out Percept because as we look at AI and the development of AI, there's so many other pieces that we need to worry about when we're talking about trying to bring AI to the edge. When everything is in Azure Cloud, everything in terms of management and deployment and security is all in one place. But what happens when you take those pieces and you start putting those intelligence and AI pieces to the edge? Well, we still need the same thing. In fact, we need even more help with deployment, management, security, updates, and GPU integration. And I'll get more into to that in just a minute. So no matter where your AI device is, to be managed by Percept. Okay, so as we think about it, where your AI device is very important. And the fact that it has access to all of the data and not just a small cache subset is very important when we're talking about video. Okay. Now, as Ellen has already shared, Microsoft has made this commitment to putting resources close to close to where our devices are, for the sake of latency and bandwidth, and therefore scalability. Now, this announcement, and so let me go ahead and put in the chat these two announcements that you need to check out. So these two are related. In one, it's the video of Mo talking about the integration with NVIDIA and the announcement. And the second is with Krista, who is with the Percept team, talking about something called AVA. So what is this AVA? So I want to give you a little bit of just a quick overview. Now, AVA stands for Azure Video Analytics. Okay. Now, when I think about what I want to talk about AVA, it makes me think of when I was a kid, right before Christmas time, and my parents said, "What do you want for Christmas?" The better question is, what do you don't want for Christmas? That'd be easier conversation to have. That is what I'm having an issue talking about, of what don't I want to talk about. So I guess let me just talk about this. AVA, Azure Video Analytics, is the piece that runs on this framework called Percept. Percept taking care of some of the stuff that we just don't really want to take care of. So it's going to take care of the different AI pieces that plug into it. So AI is the part that is going to interact with our cameras. Now, the great thing about this is interacting with our existing cameras, not having to expire cameras because, the CMS, the camera management system, says this is an old camera. AVA can interact with those and start generating information coming from those cameras. So AVA is the interaction, and we use this to customize what we're looking for. So this is not a great image. This is, in fact, it's something I call prone. Prone technically is face down. So for all of you English majors out there, forgive me. But this is a custom model that we have that are identifying pictures in this case, but we have video live, and we've defined certain types of not just objects, but actually events that are happening or actions. Now, on this, maybe you've seen some different websites that have shown hobbyists doing identifications of laptops and people and cars and all that. And that's great. But what we haven't seen, except for with very specialized and expensive systems, like there's one of those systems out there that a lot of police departments use and very expensive. What we haven't seen, except for those, are creating live alerts, but not just for one camera, for hundreds of cameras, concurrent cameras, that are customized for looking at certain events or actions. We also haven't seen systems that would then say, okay, now what? It's one thing to generate this alert, generate that we have detected a prone with 76% accuracy or confidence level, excuse me. How are we then going to send that data so that we can then record that? We can send that into our database, that we can generate a report off of that. How are we going to take these totally separate systems? How are we then going to make sure that that data stays securely and that the devices are knowing that they're talking to our Microsoft system? And then how are we going to keep that video local or the pictures local? Because there are a lot of organizations that cannot send certain pictures and videos to public cloud because of maybe they're taking care of, you know, their customer base are people who are going to be on these cameras and they don't have the rights to show their faces, or maybe they're underage or something like that. So Microsoft has made this commitment to saying, you know, originally we were going to, okay, so let me take a step back. So the big deal about Mo's announcement saying we are bringing Azure Percept to Azure Stack HCI is Azure has all the compute power, has all the GPUs to do this. But think about it. What is Microsoft's commitment is we're bringing all the resources close to where your devices and your existing applications and where your data is. So where do our video cameras reside? They don't reside in public cloud, they reside on-prem. So Microsoft, by that announcement, is showing that they are making that commitment to bring the resources, and with that announcement of coupled with NVIDIA's GPUs, bringing those resources to the local on-prem. So then we don't have to worry about, well, 400 video cameras generate a whole lot of bandwidth if we're trying to send them all to public cloud, and we don't have to worry about keeping video and pictures local and private because we can keep them on-prem. We all know how powerful Azure Stack HCI is, that, you know, several studies have just shown that it is the premier in terms of performance, the local on-prem HCI platform. And so then Microsoft expanding that and saying, hey, we're going to re-leverage this as the gateway to making a true hybrid cloud, that we can run this stuff, or that our customers can run where it makes the most sense. Now, so because Microsoft is doing that, regardless of where your needs are or your customers' needs for video cameras, security, efficiency, safety, accountability, Microsoft is showing us that they will have a complete solution. And I don't know if I can say when, but Microsoft likes to do announcements at regular times. And in my opinion, Microsoft is changing the game. And literally, this is the most excited I've been about a technology. Seeing what we can actually do with video cameras that we have never been able to do before. So much untapped data, so much unrealized actions that are going on that we could respond, or our customers could respond to people faster. You know, a good example, somebody in a school, a child has fallen down on the ground. If we could actually detect when somebody's on the ground and alert the nurse when that happens, instead of finding out an hour later, oh, we heard somebody got sick. Oh, let's go back and look at the cameras. Oh, yes, they were outside of this classroom. We could actually respond to this an hour earlier. And those types of scenarios go on and on, as I've talked to so many different organizations wanting to do more with their video cameras. So to me, this changed the game. And it's to me, it's all about how much quicker we can respond and help people. And so this is so exciting to me. Now, of course, there's lots of applications that are not just about helping people. In fact, check out those 2 URLs. So please keep an alert. Keep listening for what Microsoft makes announcements for Azure Percept and AVA, Azure Video Analytics. And please check out those 2 URLs. And I hope that my brief overview will allow you to understand what they're talking about and very quickly give you a context with which to understand why it's a big deal. And so that's
Thank you, Ben.
Onward.
That was awesome, Ben. The fact that Ben is just like all of us, in IT, admin, looking at technology, and today, we got a glimpse from 2 users looking at technology that Microsoft's bringing to Azure Stack HCI, both for Azure Virtual Desktop and for Azure Percept with GPU and AI. I think those are exciting directions that all of us as decision makers for our organization could look at and evaluate. And that's the goal today, is to share those knowledge and stuff that our customers and our partners are doing. We are definitely over time, but I don't care. Do you have any questions specific? Anybody want to ask questions? Just shout out the questions that you want and we can answer all the questions.
Did I hear correctly? It was right now we're planning on-prem workloads using Kubernetes. Did I hear correctly that Azure Stack HCI is planning to support serverless type things like Azure Functions, app services, logic apps?
Yeah, there's a couple of stuff you mentioned. The short answer is yes. The benefit of Azure Stack HCI OS is the ability to build an on-premises infrastructure while you could run many of Azure services today that exist in Azure on-premises. That's what like AKS, AVD, and other stuff you mentioned. That is the game changer that Microsoft's trying to differentiate with their hybrid cloud. That's exactly the benefit of Azure Stack HCI.
Okay, so for my understanding of the differentiation between Azure Stack HCI and Azure Stack Hub was that Hub also supported all of the serverless type stuff. But it sounds like HCI is adopting those capabilities, and so if we're looking to do serverless type code deploying on-prem, we could use HCI for that. Is that right?
Assuming support it. The biggest difference between Azure Stack Hub and Azure Stack HCI is Azure Stack Hub is a contained Azure instance. You're running Azure on premises with a confined set of hardware that you're confined to a set of rules. Whereas the Azure Stack HCI is a stripped down version of Windows Server OS for infrastructure running on premises. That's taking Azure capability and running on premises. It's a huge difference. You have to look at it from 2 worlds. One is taking Azure down. One is going up to Azure as a hybrid cloud services.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Next question would be around, we've got great plans, proof of concepts that we want to build. Is there a way for us to get some base level of hardware that where we can test some of our ideas without going full-on expensive production environment?
Absolutely. You just email me and email DataON. then we'll work with you, and just put your email on there, Rob. You're actually one of only 3 people I don't know among the 50 people here. So you just put your email there, and we'll reach out to you, and we could talk.
Excellent. All right. Thank you.
And Rob, just to add to your question about serverless technologies coming to HCI specifically, if you have specific, and I'm speaking from experience, I do not work for Microsoft here, but just working with these folks, if you have specific use cases that you may think are interesting, get in touch with Ellen, get in touch with someone from the Microsoft team. Howard can hook you up with them too. The various PGs that exist in that ecosystem are always willing to hear customer stories to know like what they should be focusing on.
Okay.
That's kind of how AKS on HCI came about. That's kind of how AVD on HCI came about, because people like me were really annoying and said, hey, I really, really want to like see this. And they ran with it. So they're going to focus on what people want. They're not just going to like pick and choose. They're going to actually try to see where, like, is this useful? Do people actually want this? Then let's try to get it to them. So if you got ideas, throw it out to them. Sorry, I'm giving Ellen and folks more work, but I feel like that's the best way to have an open conversation.
Yeah, and you're accessing the entire resource of people who actually know these Microsoft people, good, bad, and different. And I always want to say that there's never always perfect, because we learn through our experience, and DataON been doing this for 10 years. We have been through the good, bad, and difference of every technology, and our goal is continue to help you support it.
Okay. If we have a proposed architecture, hardware, software, all of that, what's the best resource for us to use to validate that? Would we go through y'all? Would we go through Microsoft?
I think you just email us, we'll set up a meeting, then after that meeting, you have all your questions answered.
Okay.
And welcome to the group.
Thank you.
There's a good group of people here. Anything else, guys? All right, I think this is what's one of the best session we have. A lot of great questions, a lot of great content. Thanks to Ernie, thanks to Alan, thanks to Benjamin. Great stuff that's new, that people actually want to know, and really brings excitement into what's in store in 2022. Happy holidays, have a safe holiday, and we'll see you guys next year. Thank you.
I think so.